Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be reading a Bungo Stray Dogs one-shot that I wrote, and it is called Who Is That Akutagawa? Now I normally don't do this for the other podfics that I'm doing so far, but since this is a one-shot, I am going to actually read the summary. As things finally settled down, Fukazawa and Ranpo walked in the door. Ranpo took one look at everyone and started pouting. "I missed all the fun again, didn't I?" he whined. Kunikida just wanted a normal day for once. He should have known it was too good to be true. Or, the ADA has a guest from the future. The agency, plus a few guests from the Port Mafia, freak out big time. Alright, and that was the summary, so here we go. It was a normal day in the office. Dazai slacking off and antagonizing Kunikida in the process, Ranpo munching on snacks, and Kenji watering his plants. When someone entered the room. Now that by itself wasn't unusual. After all, clients came in and out all the time. But people didn't normally appear out of nowhere between one blink and the next as if they had teleported. "Ah!" Atsushi yelped, flinching as a person suddenly materialized right in front of him. Everyone looked over at them, only to freeze when they saw the newcomer, who looked at him before blinking and saying, "Jinko?" "Akutagawa?" Atsushi stammered, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The mafioso, who looked way older than the last time he saw him, looked at him for about 5 seconds before groaning. "You've got to be kidding me." He glanced around before spotting Dazai and going over to him. "Hello, Dazai-san. It appears I've ended up in the past." Dazai blinked before seeming to understand what was happening. "You were fighting an ability user?" Akutagawa nodded, explaining the situation. "Yes, he had an unknown ability, but we were sent out anyway since he was causing some problems. His ability must have been some sort of time travel. I'm guessing I'm the only one here, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. I don't know if there's a time limit or anything though, so we might have to wait for your future self to find the ability user before I can return." Atsushi, who had finally processed that future Akutagawa was standing in their office, spoke up. "You said we. Who are you with?" He had a feeling he knew who it was, but he was hoping he was wrong. Akutagawa stared at him with the most deadpan look he'd ever seen. "Who else?" he asked. Atsushi sighed. "I thought so." Dazai was grinning, elated for some reason. "So, Shinsakoku is still going strong then?" The mafioso glanced back at him and smirked. "Of course we are, although I'm starting to miss the time when we didn't have to fight some sort of crazy opponent every 2 weeks. Dazai chuckled. "You'll get used to it. By the way, do you happen to have your eye on anyone?" Akutagawa shook his head. "I think we might have a little ways to go before we find our successors, Dazai-san. Unlike you, we can't see someone and immediately know what they would be a good fit for it." Seeming to have put some pieces together, Kyoka asked, "Are you saying that Dazai-san is part of Sakoku? The legendary duo that can destroy entire gifted organizations overnight? And that Akutagawa-san is your successor?" Dazai smirked. Yes, and one of them, yes. Care to take a guess who his partner is?" Kyoka thought for a moment, then her eyes widened and she turned towards Atsushi. Dazai clapped. "Good job, Kyoka-chan." The rest of the agency appeared to still be trying to wrap their heads around what was happening, but Kunikida finally snapped out of his confused daze and marched over to Dazai. "Oi, bandage wasting device, explain!" Dazai just glanced at him before returning his gaze to the time traveler. "Which part, Kunikida-kun? If you're talking about Akutagawa-kun here, I think we've made it very clear that this is his future self that was hit by a time travel ability." Just all of it!" the clearly very exasperated blonde yelled. But he was cut off by the mafioso. "Before I forget, Dazai-san." He waited until he received a nod from the brunette before continuing. "The rat doesn't stay quiet, and apparently he took your advice about the clown." Dazai rolled his eyes, muttering about, of course he didn't stay quiet, but chuckled at the latter part of the statement as Akutagawa continued. "Though I don't think Juya-san was very happy with you getting yourself shot, stab poisoned, regular poisoned, or any of the other ways you nearly died during that whole sequence of events. His words, not mine." At this point, the whole agency was very concerned, but only Dazai seemed to know what the mafioso meant. "Any more advice from the future?" he said, in a sarcastic tone that clearly meant something slightly different to Akutagawa since he kept talking. "Maybe don't let him start a vampire apocalypse this time. I prefer to retain control over my body if possible. He continued in a softer voice that Atsushi wouldn't have heard if not for his advanced hearing. And hopefully not traumatize Atsushi further. The after effects are bad enough for us. He did do a good job of taking care of Rashomon for me, though. This caused Atsushi's mind to temporarily blank. Did Akutagawa just call him by his name? And compliment him and seem worried for him? And say that he gave Atsushi Rashomon? Kyoka had apparently noticed his shocked expression since she came over and nudged him with her shoulder, giving him a concerned look. After pushing aside his shock, he could freak out about it later, he gave her a nod and a smile to reassure her that he was okay. She smiled back and returned her attention to the group that was conversing about rats and clowns and dogs and a dragon? Mr. Fancy Hat fought a dragon? That's so cool, Kenji said with stars in his eyes. This caused Akutagawa to turn to him with a half-smirk, half-smile on his face. Wow, that expression looked so weird coming from him, Atsushi thought, and say, yeah, he did. Played whack-a-dragon with the building and everything. At that, most of the agency's mouths collectively dropped open, while Kenji just beamed harder. I hope I can be as cool as him and all of you guys someday. Akutagawa's expression softened slightly, and he said, you ended up turning one of our strongest opponents into an ally, so I think you did a pretty good job, Kenji-kun. Though maybe don't wear yourself out so much this time around. I heard you used a form that kind of did a number on you. Kenji stiffened as the last sentence registered before shaking himself and saying, thank you, with his usual smile. The mafioso paused, seeming to consider something for a few seconds, then turned to Yoshino. Just a heads up, your old friend's brother is after you. He'll come around eventually, though. As the purple-hailed woman froze, he turned back to Dazai and added, the boss is aware, though I don't know when in the timeline he finds out. The brunette nodded. Anything else? Just one more thing, Akutagawa said, spinning on his heel and marching over to Atsushi, grabbing his wrist as he sternly said, you're coming with me, and dragged the were-tiger into the still-stunned Yoshino's office. Behind him, Atsushi could hear Tanzaki ask, did a mafioso really just teleport in here, drop a bunch of bombshells on us, and then kidnap Atsushi? And Dazai's accompanying laughter. Akutagawa closed and locked the door behind them before turning to face him and, surprisingly, pulling him into a hug. Atsushi stiffened before forcing himself to relax as Akutagawa said, don't give up. Things are going to get a lot harder and you'll have to face your past. Both of us will, but you're strong enough to handle it. You have the agency and I'll be with you every step of the way. I know I wasn't very nice to you at this time yet, but it will get better. We're partners after all. He felt his partner tap on his back in a specific pattern. Pause. 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 The memory of Dazai trying to teach him Morse code surfaced, and Atsushi realized the pattern spelled SSKK? He asked. Akutagawa tightened his hold for a split second before letting go and pulling back. You heard my conversation with Dazai-san. We're Shinsakoku, he smirked, and we don't let anything stop us. Atsushi actually started to tear up at that, but he waved them away in favor of getting some of his questions answered. Earlier, when you were talking to Dazai-san, did you actually call me by my name? And say that I got more traumatized from you turning into a vampire? And what was that about me having Rashomon? Akutagawa went to the last part, pulling Atsushi to one of the beds before beginning to talk, their shoulders comfortably brushing as they sat next to each other. Before I got turned, we were fighting a very strong opponent. I ended up giving you Rashomon to use one of our most powerful combos, but the opponent attacked me while you were trying to get Ranpo-san to safety. You didn't take my death very well. Atsushi froze at the words, my death. Akutagawa died? His thoughts were interrupted by said mafioso bumping his shoulder into Atsushi's. I'm still here, aren't I? The vampire ability has a healing aspect for those who have been turned, and I don't have any permanent injuries from it. You also kept me from hurting anyone else. I know you're probably worried about that. You're an idiot, Atsushi toked out, leaning slightly on Akutagawa, who grabbed his hand and squeezed it. So you told me, the Ravenette chuckled. And Chiyo-san said the same thing about after the whole vampire apocalypse was over. We defeated the guy that started it, though. Not the rat behind it, that was Dazai-san's job. And Chiyo-san, by extension, of course. But you guys did get a new member out of that. He got dragged along by Dazai-san for a while and ended up joining. Sounds about right, Atsushi laughed, somewhat calmer after Akutagawa's reassurance. They were interrupted by Dazai yelling from the main room. Atsushi-kun, if you're ready, bring our guest in here, please. They looked at each other and nodded, sliding off the bed and walking over to the door. Akutagawa unlocked it, but paused with his hand on the doorknob. He grabbed Atsushi's hand and gave it another squeeze before opening the door, revealing that everyone was still in the room, as well as, "Hello, Chiya-san," Akutagawa said, a smile ghosting across his face before it was quickly hidden. Akutagawa. The hatted mafioso was standing with his arms crossed. "You got hit by a time travel ability? Really?" Akutagawa just shrugged. "I was distracted by a certain someone." His eyes darted to Atsushi before looking back to Chiya, leaving himself open for an attack while getting a civilian out of danger. "Partners, am I right?" Chiya scoffed. "You got that right. I've lost count of the times Mackerel's left it to me to pick up the slack." The conversation was interrupted by Kenji, who was still practically sparkling with awe. "Mr. Fancy Hat, are you really going to fight a dragon?" Chiya just turned to Dazai with a raised eyebrow, and the brunette smirked. "According to our guest, you played Whack-A-Dragon with a building." "I'm not even surprised anymore," Chiya sighed, before there was a knock at the door, and Dazai's smirk grew even bigger. "Come in," he called, and the entire agency turned to see the present Akutagawa and one of the Black Lizard members entering the room. "You called, Dazai-san?" President Akutagawa said, bowing slightly while keeping both Dazai and the rest of the room in his field of vision. His companion inclined their head as well, but their eyes widened in shock when they saw future Akutagawa, and they let out a choked noise. "Gin, what's wrong?" President Akutagawa said, as he turned to look at his companion and followed their gaze towards the pair standing opposite them, his eyes also widening at the sight. "Oi, Jinko, what is this?" he demanded, taking a couple steps forward. "What, can't recognize your future self?" the were-tiger said sarcastically. "Stop playing around," the mafioso said angrily, unleashing a small tendril of Rashomon in an attempt to stab him. Atsushi didn't want to transform in the office, so he was about to try and dodge when a hand caught his wrist, keeping him in place. The attack stopped right before it hit him, a familiar shield between them. Akutagawa was about to start yelling when he was cut off by a stern, dark voice. "Let me make this perfectly clear. No one touches him. I don't care if you are my past self. Now is not the time or place to fight." Atsushi was once again touched by how much the future mafioso cared about him. Not that he'd ever admit it to the version of the man that was now staring, shocked, at them. "What happened to you?" he spluttered. Chiya apparently decided it was a good time to intervene because he walked over and put a hand on the fuming mafioso's arm. "Why don't you ask Dazai, since apparently he's behind most of it?" "As usual," he muttered. "Dazai-san?" Akutagawa asked, turning to the brunette. "So glad you asked, Akutagawa-kun," Dazai chirped. "Your future self is protecting his partner. As a member of Sakoku generation, of course. I was very happy to hear that Shin Sakoku is still protecting Yokohama." Akutagawa's mouth dropped open. "Partner? We're a Sakoku generation?" "Of course we are," his future version scoffed. "Dazai-san would have anything else, and someone needs to deal with the crazy people trying to take over Yokohama. Dazai-san and Chiya-san have bigger things to worry about, after all." Gin, who seemed to have recovered from seeing future Akutagawa, spoke up. "Your stance. You don't kill anymore, do you?" Practically everyone's jaws hit the floor as the time traveler shook his head. "His doing," he said, pointing a thumb at Atsushi, which made him even more shocked. Chiya glanced at Dazai before smiling at Atsushi and future Akutagawa. "Glad someone's able to finally calm you down," he chuckled, but stopped to look at the other mafioso's face. "I wouldn't say that," Akutagawa smirked. "I just have a different way of defeating our opponents now." Before anyone could say anything else, a familiar blue light surrounded him. "Looks like my Dazai-san found the ability user." "Gin," he called, drawing the assassin's attention. He signed something with his hands. Atsushi could tell he was using sign language, but he didn't know what he was saying. And Gin's eyes widened and started to tear up slightly. The time travel then turned to Atsushi and kissed him full on the lips, prompting everyone to start freaking out. Well, everyone except for Dazai, who was smirking, Gin, who was still teary-eyed from whatever future Akutagawa had said, President Akutagawa, who had blue-screened and was staring at them with his mouth open, and Atsushi, who was both completely blue-screening and turning into a tomato. "See you in the future, Atsu," he said, smirking, right before he disappeared into the blue light. I'm proud of you. Gin couldn't believe what her brother, his future self, but still her brother, had just told her. He was actually proud of her? A smile slowly started to form under her mask, and she wiped at her eyes to rid them of the tears that had settled there. She would have to make sure to give Ryunosuke a tight hug when they got home. It wouldn't look good in front of the ADA, after all. However, her planning was interrupted by said brother yelling angrily and launching himself at Atsushi, who was furiously blushing for some reason. "Jenko!" he yelled. Wait, was he also blushing? What had happened while she was thinking? The were-tiger snapped out of his trance at the mafioso's yell, flinching in what appeared to be fear before dodging the strike from Rashomon and running out the door, Akutagawa angrily chasing him with both of them still blushing. "Akutagawa, stop!" she could hear the were-tiger yelling. Gin sighed. "Daze-san, Juya-san, I'll take my leave now." Juya, who was seemingly coming out of shock, nodded. "I think it's about time for me to leave as well. I'll give you a ride back to headquarters." As they were about to walk out the door, Daze called, "Make sure to leave them be. I think they both need to process what just happened." She could hear the teasing tone in his voice, and Chuya didn't stop walking, just responded with, "Buzz off, stupid mackerel. And we will be having words later, got it?" Yeah, love you too, Chibi," the brunette chirped, causing a fierce blush to appear on the redhead's face as he pointedly didn't look at the detective while leaving. Gin could hear the rest of the agency freaking out even more behind them, though. "Hey, Chuya-san?" she asked as they got on the motorcycle he'd apparently driven to get there. Chuya acknowledged as he started the vehicle. "What happened when future Ryunosuke went back to the future? I was kinda lost in thought at the time, and everyone was freaking out when I checked back in when Ryu started yelling again." Oh, that. She couldn't quite identify the emotion in his voice, but she thought it was something between amusement and exasperation. "I'll tell you later. I need a drink." The last part was muttered into the wind as they started driving, and she wouldn't have even caught it if it wasn't for her heightened assassin senses. Oh well, she supposes she'll find out later. 2 hours later. As things finally settled down, Fukazawa and Ranpo walked in the door. Ranpo took one look at everyone and started pouting. "I missed all the fun again, didn't I? He whined. Kunikida just wanted a normal day for once. He should have known it was too good to be true. Alright, and that is the one-shot. Thank you everyone for listening, and I will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.